So who had heard of homeoprophylaxis before tonight? You had heard about it? Yeah, it's awesome. So again, so here we're here with Kate Birch, and she's awesome. And on top of being awesome, she's a board-certified classical homeopath, registered with the North American Society of Homeopaths. She has been in practice currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota since 1994. She lectures locally and internationally on the use of homeopathy for infectious disease prevention and treatment. Her practice specializes in pediatrics. She works with families who have not vaccinated in keeping their children healthy and supporting the immune system through its natural development with children who have suffered from vaccine injury or other developmental concerns. She has 2 grown children, and she loves to travel and meet people from all over the world. And she is really an amazing resource to have. So for those of you that are local, I am the local homeoprophylaxis supervisor. Where are you? Santa. Where?
Santa Clarita.
Santa Clarita. Oh, okay, so you came from all the way from Santa Clarita. Amazing. I'll put you in touch with families there because I no longer service them. So I'm out here in Orange County, and you can speak to me about details of how to get the homeoprophylaxis. And Kate is honored to be teaching us tonight more about the details.
Okay, great. Hi. So I'm so glad that you made it tonight. This subject is a big subject. So what Tanya was reading from is a book that's called The Solution. And I've been following the vaccine paradigm since my son was first vaccinated at 2 months of age, and he is now 31. So that was a long time ago, and I saw after the DPT he went into high-pitched screaming, and I just didn't like what I saw. And my daughter is 24. She was never vaccinated. And as a homeopath, I have made this be my main focus in all the work that I do. So currently I am the director of Free and Healthy Children International, and we are a 501c3, and our goal is to do homeoprophylaxis research. And we have research that's ongoing. We have about 600 kids who are enrolled in the program under research. It's also to educate the general public on homeoprophylaxis and also to educate supervisors. So we have supervisors all over, and that's the access to homeoprophylaxis. So the way we are based out of Minnesota, but we have about 80 supervisors around North America, and there's a number of them in California. There's probably like 20 in Northern and 20 in Southern California too. So freeandhealthychildren.com, or it's .org is the website. And for those listening live, if you, and you guys too, if you want to support us, please do donate. If you are interested in supporting something else aside from the vaccine paradigm, we need money to do that. So our primary goal is to protect children's immune systems, because we see children as an investment in our future, and as a parent, you also want to do all the best things that you can for your children. So we educate, we certify, and the data collection, that is the entrance to the research closed at the end of 2014. It's a 44-month program, and so we are expecting, some people have already finished the course. We started in 2009, and then expecting in 2018 for that research to be culled and put together, and what we have. And do I tell a little bit about, okay, so this is more about the construct, and after this slide I'll say what we're actually studying. So what we have for the public is a comprehensive and cohesive program. So all of our supervisors are offering the same program. This is the HP program booklet, which is kind of like a vaccine card. It has an overview of the program, and in it has what's called the status sheet, which is, it's a self-administered program, means you get the kit at home, you do have a supervisor, and then you work through the program with your babies and mark off the remedies. And then the next page is, there's a little journal, and you put in, remedy response. and I'll just talk a little bit more about that later. So one of the main things that comes out of parents doing this program, particularly in the environment that we live in, which is all the fear-mongering on the media and all your friends that did vaccinate and you didn't vaccinate, and you know, oh, well then what if my baby does get sick? Like, what do I do? Is actually by working with a supervisor and going through the program, you start to become empowered and you see what the remedies are doing and how your baby's growing or your child is growing, and it's like, wow, you know, and then fear of disease kind of goes away and it starts becoming this, well, what does their immune system do? And so we'll come back to that a little bit more. So this work is based on Dr. Isaac Golden, who's a homeopath in Australia. And one of his research, we replicated his research pretty much exactly. His program slightly different, but the same construct. And one of his findings was that children were healthier across the board who did the homeoprophylaxis. And some of that will become apparent as I go through the lecture of how and why that can be. And then we are, by doing this program as a parent, then you are actually being responsible to society, because that's one of the things that people who vaccinate and you don't vaccinate to say, well, you're just putting all, you know, everybody at risk in that, which is not true, but you are contributing to lowering infectious disease rate and doing your part in contributing, and that's very important. And also this huge piece is economic sustainability. And I'm going to talk more about that because that's one of the platforms of this lecture tonight. So for our supervisors, we offer membership, and actually we've just opened up the possibility of the public becoming a member of FHCi. On the website, it's possible to sign up as a member. Actually, we haven't, it's not quite yet done like that. It's going to be. And all of our supervisors, they have supervision too. So if they run into a situation where they've given a remedy, there's a remedy response is protracted, and they're still learning what's going on, they're fully covered, so that the integrity from the administration of the program to the delivery in the children is, you know, transparent and cohesive, and not like you go to get a vaccine and you go end up in the ER the next day and they say, oh, it has nothing to do with the vaccine. It's like, no, we gave a remedy, what's happened? Okay, now what do we need to do, and what's going on with that? Continuing education, we also have central governance and communication system that, so we are able to communicate to all of our supervisors in a pretty rapid fire way, and they can communicate back to us. We are looking at epidemiological monitoring, and that's one thing, because I know that measles has sort of sprung its head here in this part of town. And so we do have and you would have to go through Tanya or Astra. We do have a way to get onto, if you just want to do a single disease morbillinum, which is the measles, and it enters into research also, and you would become a member. That's why I said through that program we have it set up as a membership, but we don't have it quite set up on the website. It's still developing. We're developing a public profile, and for those practitioners, they are part of the research and income stream for themselves too. So, and then just to say what we are studying with the research is, you know, even the ethics of vaccine research is they can't give a vaccine to this group and no vaccine to this group and expose them to infectious disease, because it's unethical. So we're not doing that either. And what they do in the vaccine industry is that they give a vaccine to this group, and then they give everything but the infectious agent to this group. And then they look and see if they develop antibodies. And then they compare the groups on what were the side effects of the vaccine. But if there's no difference, like if this group had, you know, 40% of them went into anaphylaxis, and this group went in, 40% went into, 41% went into anaphylaxis, they would say there's no difference between the control and the vaccine, so the vaccine's safe, right? So it's not very good science. So what we are studying is the precept of homeoprophylaxis is that when you give an infectious agent, it's going to stimulate the immune system to produce an immunological response. One thing that we're studying is what is that immunological response? We're expecting mild symptoms of the disease because the immune system is gearing up towards that disease process. But it's energetic dose, so it's mild symptoms. So that's one of the things we're studying. Another thing we're studying is, can parents do a self-administered program? Can they stay on track with the doses? Can they follow through? Can they write it down on the paper? And one of the pieces, my own critic view on this, is that a lot of parents aren't able to. I have parents who started like 7 years ago. It's a 44-month program, and they're still like only halfway through. They get sidetracked, or they forgot about it, or the kids get sick, or they didn't think it was that important. You know, so you know, there's going to be a lot coming out of that. And then we are studying what's the long-term health outcome. So Golden also studied on 5 parameters: ear infections, allergies, asthma, skin conditions, and behavioral or developmental problems, which are all present in every child who's been vaccinated in one or other. And we can compare our results with the regular vaccinated crowd. And so far, none of our HP kids are showing up with any of these symptoms. And actually, if they come into the HP program slightly allergic or have a little skin thing, there's a tonification process by experiencing that immunological, which actually lessens these symptoms. So we'll come to that in a little bit. So the overview of today's lecture is to, one, give language about how to talk about this, because it's one of the most divisive conversations you could have with people. Some people would rather not talk about it and just ignore it. But also, what are we doing with vaccines? Because a lot of people will stand on the vaccine platform, but then when you actually talk to them about vaccines, they won't know that much about it. And also, here in California, my kids were born in Northern California in the 80s. 92 is my daughter, so you know, they were talking about ectopia back then, and I haven't lived in California for more than, it's been 25 years, and I'm just like, wow, you know, things are different here now. And with this mandated vaccine thing, you know, we've been following this, and in Minnesota, I just heard they've just introduced again, second time around, legislature that you need to go to the MD before they'll sign off on the exemption, which is the first step of how they got rid of the exemptions here in the state. So, but we do want to talk about government and role of government, and there are some things just to give you some more ideas on that. We're going to look at the role of infectious disease in the individual and collective, and how immune systems are government of the individual, and that how that parallels with the larger government. Homeoprophylaxis and survivability of humanity, because if you have seen vaxxed, things are not looking good, and we need to do something different. And that's part of the reason why we're going live today. And you know, I'm not that much of a public speaker in this platform yet, and so but we all need to be on this discussion. We all need to be moving towards something different if we are going to survive. I myself specialize in vaccine damage, not because that's what I wanted to do, because that's what came, and I became very good at it, and I teach a lot of people. My first book I wrote is Vaccine-Free Prevention and Treatment of Infectious Disease, and it's taken me around the world, and it's brought all these kids to me. And Free and Healthy Children was born out of my work of seeing more and more children being damaged by vaccines, and going, no, stop, like that. So the solution is the working book for how to really understand homeoprophylaxis. These books are also available on Amazon. It's called A Parent's Guide to Educating Your Child's Immune System, and the goal of the book, it's a coffee table book. It's intended to be displayed, but it's going to give you the language with which to talk to your in-laws, talk to your partner. Oftentimes the vaccine question becomes very divisive in relationships, and it just really looks at how the immune system's working, you know, what infectious disease is doing, basically what I'm talking about now. But, so that one's there. So we want to start with the true nature of infectious contagious disease, at least from the homeopathic point of view and from an evolutionary point of view, that these pathogens have co-evolved with us. They're not the big bad meanies that everybody makes them out to be, that actually they are gifts to humanity to help humanity evolve. And what exactly are they trying to do? So its contagion is based upon susceptibility. It means that not everybody at all times is going to get sick. If you're weak, then that infectious agent actually comes along to strengthen you if you survive it. So I've got a slide that's going to come up in a little bit. Epidemics are based upon collective susceptibilities, means if there's a group of people in one area, there will be that have similar weakness in whatever their health is, that epidemic will come along to sort of wake that up. The actions of pathogens serves as a pressure release valve for the human population. It also serves as a pressure release valve in your own system. Dr. Pam was talking about toxins. And one of the things, having that febrile process and purging through vomiting or diarrhea or breaking into a sweat after the fever resolves, is you are eliminating toxins that infectious agent has actually entered into your body to activate that system. And so infectious disease prevention models must be coordinated to understand the pressures of society. And what that means too is that if you have a group of individuals that are succumbing to a particular individual, there is some phenomena that's happening within that group that needs to be addressed. And I'll just use one example, is in Haiti after the earthquake, and the earthquake actually destroyed the government buildings, and then the sewer and the water started mixing, then cholera broke out in that environment. Okay, but Haiti's an island, disconnected from the rest of the world. So where does cholera come from? If it's in an island that's separate from the rest of the world, how could that disease show up there? I actually just read something that somebody came with cholera to the island. But if somebody came with cholera to Florida, would there be a cholera outbreak? No. Cholera comes when there's destruction of the government at the same time as an environmental disaster and the sewer gets in the water. And to remedy cholera, they keep trying to make a cholera vaccine. Is there a market for a cholera vaccine? You know, would a cholera vaccine work? Is no. Actually what works is if you restructure the government, because humans actually do need an archetype of government to live under. You know, we hopefully don't have an oppressive government, you know, but whatever, the tuberculosis is for those oppressive governments. But so that cholera comes, and it also brings people to come and work on the sewers and clean up the sewers. And that in itself is how we got rid of cholera. So the question I asked myself, I went into a full day-long silent meditation before I came to California, partly because of the measles, but partly because of the mandatory laws here. And there's some of my friends around the world, they've done other shamanic journeys into what each infectious agent question that infectious agent is asking us. So I've asked the question on measles, and I'll talk about it shortly, but we'll just talk about this susceptibility piece. So there's three possible phenomena if you're exposed to an infectious agent. One is that you will repel the disease, means that it, you know, nothing happens and you're strong and you're just, the other is you will actually go through the disease experience, and then once the disease passes, you return back to your state of health. And in, did they have Waldorf school here? Like anthroposophical thinking, and in homeopathic thinking that actually these infectious agents like chickenpox and measles, they capitulate a huge developmental change in the child that goes through that disease. And so, so the disease, the original state of health doesn't come back just as it was, but actually they're better, stronger if they make it through that disease process. So what this is asking is, what is the strength of the child? It's most of the vaccine paradigm and even antibiotics, it's all about the bad meaning of disease. And even the vaccine paradigm as we have it is like we have to avoid that, keep it away, we don't want that. And the truth is we do want the immune response. And ultimately we want individuals to be as strong as they can be so that they can go through that process. So if you have an individual that is not able to go through the disease, you get an incomplete immune system response, and then that person ends up in a state of chronic disease. And one of the most common examples is you see somebody who had mono, and ever since they had mono, 20 years later, they're still in chronic fatigue syndromes. That they were not able to overcome that. Pneumonia is another one. But it would be the same. Measles, it's chronic state is a demyelinization and slow retardation, which is actually one of the things that happens from the MMR vaccine, which is interesting because it's true too that some individuals will be vaccinated, they will have an immune response and get over and clear that vaccine out, but the majority of them, with so many vaccines being put in the body, it's not happening. So the normal disease path is this circle of disease, which my arrow doesn't work, but you have a prodromal phase, the chill, the rigors pull on the bones release calcium, so that when the fever is there, the calcium protects the brain, so you don't get febrile seizures, and the fever's intention is to set upon the white blood cells to start making antibodies, and then the antibodies climb onto the antigen, and then you develop a discharge, and you get rid of that, and you go through this whole process, and it resolves with a sweat, and then you have immunity. And even if we are exposed to a vaccine, you want the same experience to happen. Yes.
So you're saying a fever is good.
A fever is good.
Can you repeat that again?
A fever is good. Bring it on, baby. Yeah.
You don't have to call me every time you die.
Fever is good. You watch. So this is one of the questions, especially with young babies. Are they peeing and pooping? Are their diapers? Every 2 hours, they need to have a wet diaper, you know, nursing. And if they're not nursing, they're too weak to suckle, give them a bottle, give them water. They should be peeing every 2 hours. But the two things that I say to watch for is thumbs in the fists. This means that there's some inflammation going in the back of the head, and or any arching back like that. And then you do want to be calling somebody. And rapid respiration is another, or breathing with the scalene muscles could be pneumonia coming on. But if you have a practitioner to work with, that would be the time to call. And it's also the state of the child. Means if you can have a 99-degree fever and the child is like eyes rolling back and listless and, you know, very slow respiration, that is a bad situation. But if you can have a child that's got a 104 fever and they're just watching TV or playing, that's okay. You know, their body is just strong and working through that process. Okay, so if we look at that same bell curve, or that same, if we actually, like if you're a mathematician, you understand how sinusoidal rhythm is, but if you take that circle and stretch it out on a line, you're going to get this curve. And you'll see in an epidemic that first few cases, and then slowly that population starts to develop immunity, and there's a peak of the epidemic, and then there's a social, economic, or cultural, or behavioral shift that happens. And you may have even remembered that the last time you had a fever. Influenza, you got it, you're in bed, you know, shiver, get under the blankets, drink hot soup, hot shower, whatever, and you're laying there. And then at some point in the night, it's like your body relaxes, like something's happened. But through that, I mean, I've had fevers where in the beginning my mind is just tossing around all this crap and all this garbage, worry, stress, relationships, you know. And then at some point you get to a resolution. And this thing, if a true epidemic was able to act out in society, you would get the same thing. And then you would get a decline in disease incidence. So the question I have, because if anybody studied any vaccines, you can see that they were all introduced at the end of the bell curve, nearly all those diseases. What we've done by continuing to subject that population to these vaccines is actually stretched out this bell curve. We've actually, and because the measles virus is shed from the MMR vaccine, and you know, they blame it on the unvaccinated, but they're keeping that virus alive and well in the population. And mortality from measles was down almost at the end of its bell curve by the time 1973 when the MMR was introduced, or measles initially by itself. So the immune system as government, its primary goal is to differentiate self from non-self. Who am I and what am I not? So also normally when we're exposed to an infectious agent, it touches upon the mucous membrane. And the mucus, or the skin, which is our first line of defense, that's our boundary or border or whatever. And in that process of developing that fever and elimination pathway for whatever that infectious agent is, we reclaim ourselves, right? We've moved it out. Now, what happens when you bypass that pathway by injection is that a child's immune system will have foreign things circulating inside without the peripheral actually being informed that some enemy is coming, i.e. like a terrorist. Okay, so an acute disease process is actually a short-lived manifestation of the struggle between the ego and the forces of hereditary or reality. Means how is this individual going to survive based on this environmental consternation. So I've seen it too. Oftentimes fevers will come in infants at developmental stages, i.e. when they're just being weaned. The baby is so connected to the mom, and then at that point in time where the mom's like, okay, you're done, you're actually stepping out in the world by yourself, the infant's immune system, I mean, emotionally that's a huge piece for them too, but their immune system is like, oh, okay, so how am I going to do this? And then a fever can come. Or you can see it in toilet training time, or teething time is another transformational time because the brain is actually changing and allowing other parts of the brain to grow, which is involved in the ego development and individuation like that. So the question we have, is it possible to view infectious disease as a beneficial process? What benefits are we denying the child by preventing disease, and or is any treatment suppressive? And this, I'll just tell a little story of a girl who was 15, and she was exposed to somebody who had been vaccinated with chickenpox, and she contracted the shed virus and developed chickenpox herself, and went through, 6 doctors at the San Francisco hospital before they knew what it was, but no, went through her own process in it. And one of the remedies I gave her is called Mercurius. She had gotten to the point where she had pustules all throughout her mouth and in her nose and in her ears, and she felt like her teeth were falling out, and she felt like she was disgusting, rotting, pustulation. At 15, it's not very good when you're very busy making sure your hair is falling in the right place. That. She came through it, but another phenomena happened, and that's in the larger context of this girl in her life. She had lived with her mom, and she was visiting her dad over Christmas holidays, and the mom and dad had divorced because he was an alcoholic. And she, from a very early on age in her life, had become codependent to his alcoholism and looked after him instead of him looking after her. Made sure that he wasn't angry, that he was, and at that time, he, of course, picked her up at the airport drunk and, took her out for dinner. And she, after she went through the chicken pox, she's like, you know what? I'm not going to see you anymore. And what that chicken pox was able to do for her was to individuate her from her father and that codependent relationship and move her into her own self for herself. So now we come to what is the story of measles. And this is an image I just put together. I wanted to draw it because when I did my silent meditation, this is the image that I saw. And what I understood about this is that is an actual image of parenchyma. I don't know what organ it is, but basically in our system, it's like the connective tissue and the fat cells and the blood vessels in between. And even different organs have a parenchyma, but there was that. And then on the outside of it was this glowing redness of inflammation. And what I understood about this was that this was the individual's self-determination, and that the degree to which that inflammation came on the outside, we know measles produces this red rash, and the severity of measles is equal to the degree of external oppression or weakness of the individual to individuate. Means like, are you easily suppressed as an individual? Are you, like, we all want our kids to behave well and do what they're told, but the ones that have a little fire in them and say no, they're actually going to survive much better in life than the ones that are like, okay, I'll just sit here and behave. Is that sorry to say, your kid screaming is like, yeah, good, you're working that out, I see that. But in the light, and actually in the vision that I had, that there were actually lines coming down through. And so for California, the message I got was that this whole vaccine thing, and particularly because it's measles, and particularly because is about the individual in the face of the oppression of the government. And we can be thankful that measles is actually coming around, because it's waking us up to keep asking this question. So intersection of the individual with the outside world. So in the healthy state, this pink inflammation will not be there. You will have the universe and the individual in balance. And this pinkness is the amount of heat that the individual needs to create to define itself, if that makes sense. So it's intended to be contracted between 5 to 7 years of age. And in homeopathic philosophy, you're actually shedding inherited miasm. And miasm is like a taint that's put on you from your children or your parents. And without that ability to throw off that inheritance, then you get to lug around the suitcases of your parents' chronic disease. And they've also shown that, the degree of inflammation is equal and opposite to the suppression exerted upon the individual. And the kickback we must exert to claim our own autonomy, quest of the individual, inflammatory response. And what I'm hoping for is contagious disobedience in the face of this vaccine law. And a lot of people, for their own fears, are saying, oh, I have to vaccinate my kids because I need school, because I need this thing. And these kids basically become compromised because of our own inability to make other decisions. So we actually all need to take morphogenetic to kick that up inside of us, to get a little dose of measles to do that for us. So another way we can look at this is looking at remedies that treat measles. And even though they're not spoken about in this book, The Best Family Homeopathy Acute Care Manual, they are in the vaccine-free book. The images are from this book here. So, and sort of going down in intensity, pulsatilla is one of the first remedies to give measles when there's an instability, can't really stand up for themselves. The pulsatilla flower is very delicate, gets knocked over by the wind. The fever goes up and down. They'll have runny nose and be crying. The next remedy is euphrasia, that feels like they need to hold on really tightly so that, or else he's going to lose what it is. So maybe that's a little bit of the same construct, but you have to, the idea of giving up the system, I mean, this is the question, and I'm just not the only one talking about vaccine damage. I mean, the whole VAX team is amazing at what they're doing, and JFK, Junior Robert, Junior, whatever his name is, Robert Kennedy, and even the President Trump has said that he's, you know, going to be looking at this vaccine autism thing. So watery eyes is one of the first symptoms of measles. Apis is when that inflammation starts to come. Apis is if you've ever had a bee sting, you see it's that glowy red swelling. So Apis will treat cerebral inflammation that's coming from measles. So the fever is not going through its cycles, and the body's getting stuck in like so much inflammation, causes brain cry, and it's one of, so now we're moving into, so I treat vaccine damaged kids. Apis is one of the remedies that I'm using to help bring down that cerebral inflammation that these kids have from the MMR vaccine. Stramonium is also an eruptive disease, and they have a fear surrounded by enemies that are going to do big bad mean things to them. So that's there in measles. Cuprum, oh, that's the stramonium flower, sorry. Cuprum is there for cramps and spasms, and they also have this, becomes a despot, becomes like a general. So they, in order to fight back the degree of suppression, they have to become like a military person. And you see violence and convulsions, and when I see cuprum in the MMR kids, they do these things with their hands, and they, you know, make these funny things, and their eyes are off to the side. They would use the remedy cuprum. Zinc is more, it's getting repressed into the brain, and there's a state of regression and stupefaction, and that you talk to them and they will not understand what you're saying. They will not comprehend what you're saying, and you have to repeat it, or they'll do the same thing over and over and over again and like become OCD in that. And actually copper and brass make zinc, and the #1 remedy I use for vaccine damaged kids with the MMR vaccine is zinc. So the remedy will also treat the vaccine damage, but it's for the disease there too. So that's the zinc. And then ratramalbum is another one that can have profuse vomiting and diarrhea, but feels like they're an outcast or trying to regain social position. And it's just really interesting what's happening with, you know, you're an outcast because you didn't vaccinate your kids. Your kids can't come to my house because you must be like a swarming mass of diseases. Veratrum is very much there in this whole conversation. So we want to look at what a rational public health care model is, and we need to hold our government to this this model. It needs to be affordable and sustainable, i.e. if you're creating children dependent on a medical system, and or if they're so damaged that they're dependent on the whole system, it is not sustainable. And if you watch facts, you know it's not sustainable. 1 in 2 children being autistic, which autistic is a closed diagnosis. I mean, 1 in 11 kids in North America has a developmental or learning disorder, which they're still able to go through the system, but they aren't even registered in that 1 in 2 autistic. So 1 in 11 has asthma, 1 in 6 has food sensitivities, 1 in 6. So it's not sustainable. It needs to be transparent and accountable from the government to the doctor to the patient, and the construct that we have now is that doctors can't do what they want to do as a doctor in their own conscience, what they know for their patient. The government's in the way, and the patient keeps asking, the patient keeps coming and asking, and the whole thing is wrong. And it needs to be the individual's volition is there for, and again to this idea of coordinating the body, what does it say? Orchestrated from a central coordinating body. Okay, yeah, so there does need to be a system in place that monitors what's happening with the people and can apply a rational system to that. The problem with the Western medical model is they don't know how to treat infectious disease. They don't have the tools to do that. They've got vaccines and antibiotics. And that question became really clear to me when I started learning homeopathy in the 90s. It's like, oh, you can treat whooping cough. Oh, chickenpox, there's these remedies, and I just gave you a few ideas of measles remedies. Is with that in my toolbox, that is the ground that I stand on to say, you don't have to do this. And as parents learn homeopathy, they become more independent and can, gain confidence in what they're doing, because it's a rational system of medicine that manages infectious disease. And it's actually the strength of, so a system does need to look at the collective, understand the nature of disease and susceptibility, and back to this is, wow, why did that disease come in this person? What is it in that person that is calling that disease? And even in practice, I'll have somebody who's going along and, they keep getting this sickness or that sickness. And so I'll ask myself the question, what disease do they need to get better? Sometimes a child needs, I had this one child who signed up for the HP program, and he had these repeated ear infections. And every time the child was almost healthy, she was just about to give the dose, he'd get another ear infection. He'd been on antibiotics a few times. And so she never started the program. And I said, you know what? We're going to start with pneumococcinum, which is the second remedy in the program. And we do that. I'm going to give him pneumonia, because those ear infections could go into pneumonia if we let it do that. I'm just going to go ahead and jump the gun and give him pneumonia. And after that remedy was given, he was so healthy. She says this is the best. She had been treating him for 1.5 years with constitutional homeopathy beforehand, and yeah. So sometimes we all need a dose of measles and, something exciting. We'll get to this shortly. Okay, so understand the global implications of bacteria and viruses as they cohabit as cohabitants of our planet. And there's a speech that Rumsfeld did the day before 9/11 where he said, and yes, and we've just learned how infectious disease can be used as political tools. And I don't know what he meant by that, but because I've traveled extensively around the world and looking at where they're doing vaccinations and looking at, there's polio was introduced in Syria right before they started an exodus in the vaccine was introduced there. One of the symptoms of polio is fear for one's life. Dreams in the proving or of drowning. What was happening to the refugees that were going across the Mediterranean Ocean? They were living out this disease that had been injected into them. And the polio was present in America in the 50s during the civil rights movements, where at every point in turn that the Black Americans were trying to, fight for their existence, they were suppressed and suppressed and suppressed and suppressed and completely paralyzed, which is similar to what happened in Syria. And lo and behold, we had a polio epidemic in this country. And that disease actually is a mirror of what's happening in that society. And you need that point of view, which the people organizing our public healthcare system do not have that point of view. They do not understand that. And the fact was, like I mentioned about tuberculosis, is they inject everybody in the Middle East with BCG vaccine. which is tuberculosis, and the only immune response you can have to tuberculosis is inflammation, which produces a hyperactivity and violence. And they're operating on immune response. You keep vaccinating them, they're going to keep fighting because that's inside their body, and that's the only thing that they have left to do. Yes. So the theory of vaccination is to artificially manipulate antibodies, and that means immunity, and that culminates in herd immunity. I'm just going to skip through some of these slides. Vaccination is a public health care model. The intention is to stop disease without understanding the role of disease. You're giving so many diseases at once in immune systems that don't even know how to process them. Designed for delivery and compliance versus the needs of the child, and often given fever reducers to nullify that immunological response, and that's 90% of the reason why all the kids are allergic, aside from the extra aluminum, but because that febrile part of the immune system has been suppressed. All the additional toxic agents in the body, and the results of the vaccine paradigm produce kids with multiple disease agents stuck in various organs of their body, and then these are some of the statistics that I was reading off before. So we're going to talk about homeoprophylaxis. The definition of homeoprophylaxis is the use of homeopathic nosode, which is an attenuated version of the disease agent, to gently educate the immune system towards the process of infectious disease. So two parts of that is the dilution, and well, there's three, and the delivery, and the goal. So the goal is to activate an immune response. So this is a question I have on my website, is if we are giving all these infectious agents, i.e. in vaccinations, with the intention to develop immunity, and we get an immunological response, we must understand or ask the question, is this the desired response? So part of the fact of the vaccine paradigm is, just like I said, the vaccine's given and they go to the hospital because now the child's having a 105 fever or going to seizures. They say it had nothing to do with the vaccine. Or I'll also see at the other side, parents will come in and their kid's got asthma, and then I'll ask them, you know, how did you do with the vaccines? Great, no symptoms whatsoever. I'm like, well, you know, that's not good because you've just given the child 11 infectious agents and his immune system was playing dead and didn't do anything. So what's the effect of that, of not having an immunological response when you see an infectious agent? So it's all a question of dose. If you give a mild immunological response, then you will get a mild, you know, a mild stimulus, you get a mild response. And if it's mild, you will learn from it. If it's so strong, you just become bowled over by it and then the system collapses. And that's the problem with vaccination. So again, if you support this work, donate. I'm supposed to say now. Okay, so as a public health care model, the nosodes are energetic and contain no adjuvants, toxic agent, or any cultural medium like the bovine casein or the peanut oil or antibiotics or anything else they put in there. It's just, you start off with the infectious agent, which actually the nosodes in our program, they're procured from the San Diego hospital. Kids with actual disease from 2000 to 2010 is when all of them are procured. They're serologically analyzed and then taken into the dilution process of homeopathy, and then they're given orally, which, as I said, that bypassing the peripheral immune system causes confusion, and that oral touches upon the mucous membranes and activates that general immune response. It's also given one disease at a time, because each disease, our body has an orchestrated elimination path per that disease. You put in 10 diseases, it's like the body's like this, that, you know, it's like how can it develop an orchestrated immune response? It doesn't say that's 8 diseases, let me figure out which ones I'm going to get rid of. No, it says that is the most complex disease I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know what to do with that. And the program is tailored to individual needs, means that if the child is sick, you don't give the nosode. Their immune system's already occupied. Also based on the age of the child, risk of disease, and it's flexible such that as measles comes to town, you can give measles at that time and do it if you're not there. So the theory is you introduce a disease agent into a developing immune system prior to exposure to stimulate immunity. It's exactly the same theory as vaccination, but because the methodology is different, you end up with a mild immunological response, and by doing so, you start to protect the body. Oh, it's a different slide. So I'm not going through any research in here, but there's a phenomena that happens when you have more people doing the same thing. It actually affects the rest of the population without them even having to participate in that. And they did in, let's see, 1972, there was a meningococcal research done with 20,000 people in South America, in Argentina, Brazil. And they had, that's 20,000 people, 4 cases of meningitis in the treated population over 1 year period. They just gave 1 dose of the remedy. And in the untreated population, they had 23 cases of meningitis. And they repeated that in the 90s and came with 65,000 people and came up with the same, you know, it was like 65 cases in the untreated. It was 20,000 at that point, and 4 cases in the untreated or the treated population. That when you do, so our program is, and that's one thing that we are studying in the research, we have people synchronize start dates. People start on the same day. And so all the kids starting the program in February are starting on the first Sunday of February, and it's pertussin. So there's a collective resonance that starts happening when you're doing that. And the goal would be to increase and do more and more and more. As more people doing the HP program, you actually strengthen the effect. And now we have, even when you sign up with the program, we'll get to the little details like that, but there's enough remedies for up to 4 people. So the parents are doing it with the kids. And that way you're creating this umbrella of you know, collective resonance in that family, which has an effect on the larger group of people. So our basic program covers these diseases: whooping cough, pneumonia, polio, Haemophilus, meningitis, tetanus, mumps, and measles. That's protodinum and morbillinum. And initially we had used a plant remedy for polio, Lathyrus, and some people even question, why do we have polio in it, because there's no polio. But the truth is all of the parents have been vaccinated with polio, and I said that polio, one of the main things about that is fear. And we thought we're going to put the polio nosode in the program just to have it out there, just so that people can take it, to maybe start addressing the fear that's in the larger population, fear of disease, and this government oppression is there too. So we brought polio back. But each one of these diseases has a different story to tell. Oh, these are the pictures. So the morphogenetic field effect. So we see this in women who live together. Their menstrual cycles will start syncing up with each other. And the energetics of the individual is, you know, this relative field of relativity, and these fields are sensitive, and our remedies are energetic in nature. So this is where the stimulus is starting from. And because there's no actual disease given, there's nothing to materially be detoxed out of the body. You just have that immunological response as if you've seen the disease. And then it fades away because there's no actual disease there. But through that rehearsal process is you learn the disease. You learn about the disease. Yes?
So if they get leprosy, will they get a cough?
Some of the symptoms are they will start getting a tickle in the throat. The first symptoms of whooping cough are like and then a little more extra mucus is going to come from the throat, and that's the symptoms that are going to come with whooping cough, nosode. Sometimes, like the pneumonia one, you're going to see more mucus coming. A meningitis one, or you also see fever, different ones. Not so much fever with whooping cough because whooping cough itself will only produce a mild fever. So it's the preliminary symptoms of the disease will show up as the body's defense. It's like, oh, I see that disease. What do I do? But that's just seeing it energetically. There's no actual disease, and so it will pass. Sometimes those children will get stuck in that immune response. And then that's where the supervisor comes in hand. It's like, what do we need to do to help that child move through that immunological process to get to resolution based on that circle we looked at. Like they're stuck here, you know, how do we bring them all the way around to the other side?
Now, can they be contagious?
No, because there's no disease agent present. Yeah. So they'll cough and it won't pass on to anybody. Yes. And there's one of the most common questions is, are antibodies made? Because, and this is a very important question and we would love to have a definitive answer for it, because if you can show antibodies to a disease, then you are exempt from getting vaccines because you have the antibodies. Now, because there's no disease agent, there's nothing that materially needs to be escorted out of the body. And the whole job of the antibody is to escort the disease agent out of the body. That said, that if the peripheral immune system is sufficiently stimulated, so we're touching upon the mucous membranes and there's multiple doses in the program, that the job of the peripheral immune system is to trigger specific immunity. And so if it's sufficiently stimulated, antibodies can be produced, and that some of the people that I've worked with have done titers and drawn titers, and they are producing antibodies. So then we still don't know how long does that level stay up. Sometimes you get these confusing response. You get IgA antibodies, but not IgG antibodies, and so it's there's a lot more questions and more research that needs to be done. And we, you know, on a limited budget, we have our research, but we don't have access to a lab. We're not actually researching antibodies, but we do need some university to take up this job that has the labs, that has the equipment, and to do one disease at a time. And this was a specific question I had when I set upon the task of the research. Like I saw, you know, in the 90s, vaccine damaged kids. I saw in 2000 Bush injecting himself with anthrax and smallpox. And like, you know, 1 in 500 kids, autism. I'm like, okay, it's going to change pretty soon. It's going to change pretty soon. And then I published my book, Vaccine Free, in 2007. And in 2008, went to Cuba and met Isaac Golden with the Homeoprophylaxis. And by that point, where figures of autism were, you know, 1 in 250, but they were 8 years old already by 2008, so they were not reflective of what, like, this is bad, where it's going. And then, so I found the Homeoprophylaxis, like, we're just going to research the whole program. Somebody said, well, you should just do one disease at a time and just see if that one's good and that one's good. I'm like, no, you got to just bring that in, and what that's done for families is brought them assurance, and it's pushed this forward. And what it's done for homeopaths or homeopathy is it's shed the light on a complete whole other way of doing healthcare in your family system. Okay, so just a few more slides here. So comparing and contrasting. So we get the mild immunological response, which educates the immune system, versus vaccination. So many diseases at once. It's immunological confusion and potential side effects, including death, and it's a very violent act. These two pictures tell the story. One, the child is stepping into it, and the other, it's like an imprisonment of violation of the individual. And that's really what it's like when you start doing homeopathy. The kids are like, oh, what can I have today? So our model is sustainable and transparent. The nosodes can be indefinitely made from a single source. Means that we don't have to keep getting aborted fetuses to incubate, you know, our vaccines on. It means less pull from the world's resources. it's green and clean. It's completely, you know, you have these organic people, no TV, all this stuff, and then they injecting all this aluminum in their babies. HP improves the health, so it reduces healthcare costs for the child and the family and upon society, and especially if the government's paying for our medicine, I don't know. Less sick days for the parents, they can work more, and each HP supervisor becomes your point of contact. And you get to learn about how your child's immune system's working, and then homeopathy's there. So this is the last slide. You would, if you're going to do homeoprophylaxis, you would get an initial appointment, and you get the HP program booklet, and the kit that's coming, and then these are sort of the baseline costs across the board with HP. We have basically the same like non-committal or non-competitive fees across the country, but then different practitioners can modify it. Just we have sort of a range with which they do that. And the baseline costs, and then you're good to go, and that's it. So any questions you have? I know I just rattled off a whole bunch of stuff. Yes?
What's an energetic dose?
So you take the original substance, and then it's put in, so we also, just the source of nosodes, they're from children with active disease.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a nosode is either.
Yep. So a homeopathic remedy that's made from a disease agent is called a nosode, whereas all other homeopathic remedies are just called. So we have sarcodes, which are made from healthy organs. So you can have a glandular that's made into homeopathic remedy or something like that. But a nosode is a remedy made from a disease agent. Okay? So you take that substance, and then
Like
with
anti-venom?
yeah, I'll just say in a minute. So in this situation, so the measles nosode, one of the symptoms of measles is white spots on the tonsils. So those are scraped. And in addition to having the virus, the measles virus, it also has what the body's normal immunological response would be to that virus. So that is taken and put in alcohol and mixed at 1 part to 99 parts of alcohol, and then it's succussed, banged around. And then 1 part of that, that's a 1C. That's a dilution number of 1C. And then 1 part of that is put in another 99 drops and succussed, and that's a 2C. And it goes up, so the first level of dosing is 200C. That means that that process has been done 200 times to get to where. And through the dilution, you actually dilute the original substance out by about the 12th or 13th dilution. But because it's in an alcohol solution, those alcohol molecules are polar molecules, means they have a positive and negative charge, and they're colliding together in that force field, and that positive negative aligns itself around the original substance and creates like a negative pattern. Does that make sense? And that negative pattern maintains throughout all the dilutions as you dilute out the original substance. Yeah. And then because it's the pattern, well, going back to the image of we are energetic beings before we're material beings. And our energetic body is what registers that pattern through the touch upon. So we are all water too, like 95% water. And the water molecules in our body also align themselves based on health and disease. They are a mild polar molecule, 1 hydrogen, 2 oxygens, positive, negative. So in a healthy or flow state, all of our water is aligned in a certain way. When you take a remedy, it touches upon your waters, and actually the action is instantaneous. If you've taken a remedy, you will know within 20 minutes that that remedy's moved you or shifted you because it affects the waters of our body. Yeah. Yes. Other questions? Connie's looking a little glazed over.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question now.
Yes.
Just to make sure everybody understands. So pretty much what Kate did here was before Kate put this program together, it was very difficult. As a homeopath, I've been a homeopath for 15 years, and part of the reason my older daughter got whooping cough was because she was not on homeoprophylaxis. She was older, I wasn't concerned, and there are many families that choose not to vaccinate, just don't do anything, and it's not the end of the world. If your child gets whooping cough, she heals from it, and there are homeopathic remedies to assist during that time as well. So before, when I went to homeopathy school, it was very difficult. You would have to get the nosode, and then you would have to, on an emergency, hire a homeopath, and it's a very difficult case to do. What Kate did was she actually put this whole program together where it's this whole vaccine alternative immune boosting kit, a kit where you get, and it's all structured. I actually do it in 18 months. I do it twice a month with children over the age of 1. And it's meant to be done in a 44-month program. And she just started it. Yeah, so if you have any questions, I'm offering everyone in this room a free consult. So any questions, because sometimes you don't pick up a question, you go home, and your wife asks you something. So I'll give you my number so we can set up a time to chat. And, it's made it very, very simplified, where it's a to-do process that you can do at home with your children, and the benefits can go on and on and on, and just what we've seen in the families I've seen in my daughter and what it's done for her. And the benefit, one of the things that I want to add is that Dr. Pam always says, she had measles growing up, and there's a benefit to having measles. My older daughter who got whooping cough, her lungs are so strong now. Her voice actually got better, and she sings, and she's in the choir, and she's like, it's amazing what it's done for her. That is too done. This is right to talk about that.
Well, I think you were out of the room we were talking about, because I had a whole slide on measles. But the gem of the program is empowerment, 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 empowerment from the center to the periphery. And even homeopathy, you start with one substance and you divide and you divide and you divide. And it's the most economic, sustainable model that you can have. If you can come up with anything that does that, where you take what you have and you can just divide it and replicate it with minimal effort from the beginning. And what it's done is it helps to empower communities, helps to empower you, and there's just so many other things aside from, satisfying this thing of preventing disease.
I have a question, because this
Yeah.
comes up sometimes. There's some parents who have very young children, and they have not decided whether they want to vaccinate,
Yes.
or if they are going to vaccinate, they're going to delay it until close to school age.
Yes.
So would it be beneficial for them to do HP early on, and how does that work? Can you do HP along with vaccines?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. It actually ran through my mind as I was going. I'm glad that you brought that up. So infants, the first year of life for infants, their general immune system is present. They're born with that, and they're reliant upon the mother's breast milk for antibodies for a specific disease. That's if the mother actually had those diseases. But we're now in the second or third generation where mothers didn't have those diseases, and or were vaccinated at a young age, and now the antibodies have gone down. That's why they introduced vaccinating moms right before they give birth to their baby, thinking that that's going to increase antibodies. But their immune systems actually, at that moment in time, are not going to do that, because when you're pregnant, the antibody side of your immune system does not come up. But going back to, so infants' immune systems at about 1 or 2 years of age, or in that time, they start developing specific antibodies. And that's one of the reasons why they don't introduce the measles vaccine until 15 months or 18 months of age, is because the child's immune system will never make antibodies to measles prior to that time. And those infants that do get measles at 1 year of age are at so much risk of going into the sequelae of the vaccine because their immune system doesn't know what to do with it. So, but all the vaccines, their intention is to force antibody production by the addition of aluminum. So the aluminum, it says, we're going to take this immune system that doesn't know how to make antibodies, force them to make antibodies. So that makes those one group of child more allergic, you know, so then you get the asthma or skin conditions and all the food sensitivities like that. But the other question you have to ask is if the whole goal of the vaccine is to produce antibodies and you give, because in the first year of life they get 8 diseases given, or 10 at 2, 4, 6, and 8 months, so 8 times 10 or 4 times 10, that's 40 doses, you know, before their immune system even knows how to make antibodies. That this, you can't apply that method. You could maybe do to an adult, and they may produce antibodies. So the gem of the HP, because the risk of those diseases is in infants. The risk of whooping cough is in 2 or 3 months of age. Because HP is working with the general immune system alone, then you're protecting the child on the general immune system level. So even like in this state with mandatory vaccines, do the HP first because you're protecting your child and developing their immune system. But more than that, if they've seen that immunological process and then you start introducing vaccines, they're going to go, oh, that DPT, it looks kind of like pertussis. Not really, but I know how to handle pertussis, so it'll apply the same principle. The immune system is actually a very learnable part of our, like our brains learn, the immune system. And part of the problem with what we see with our kids is that their immune system have been poorly instructed. And they're said, you're going to make allergic response to not only this antigen, but to the peanut oil and the bovine casein and the soy lecithin and the formaldehyde and the antibiotics. And lo and behold, you have a child that then is now reacting to everything in their environment. And it's not a problem of the child, it's a problem with how their immune system has been instructed to behave in the environment. So best do the program before getting vaccinated. Now, if you've done a few vaccines and you want to do the HP program and stop on the vaccines, or you're forced to do vaccines, then you work with the supervisor to come up with the best protocol to do that. And sometimes the reverse of what I just said about the memory is that if there were vaccines and they did do some DPT and they did do the Haemophilus and the pneumococcal, when you give those nosodes, it wakes up whatever immune response didn't complete itself when the vaccine was given. And those responses actually need to be worked with the supervisor to, because there's other remedies we have. Sometimes we have remedies made from the vaccines or other remedies based on symptoms. And so you asked, what are the other remedies? So the best family homeopathy guide is basic. We plant, mineral, animal. Homeopathy uses all these medicines. We use our disease tissue and sarcodes also based on. So anything can be made into it. Even medication, like somebody who had, some heavy-duty steroid or people working in toxic environments, working with dry cleaner fluid or, diesel or just whatever environmental conditions there are, there's remedies made. We have remedies made from electricity or mercury, heavy metals, mercury in your mouth. We've got remedies made from mercury amalgam to help your body detox from the mercury, like that. Yeah. All right. So.
Questions for Dr. Pam, or they're going to do that after?
Oh, questions for Dr. Pam? Yes.
They forgot about me.
I'm sorry.
So long ago. Any questions?
I have a go back with you.
A go back, okay.
Can you briefly describe, you mentioned the program that you have ongoing through
The research?
Through 2018. Yeah, can you describe that, what you're planning to compare or report on?
So we're looking at the same 5 parameters that Golden looked at: ear, nose, and throat, allergies, eczema, asthma, behavioral, and developmental. And the allergies, eczema, and asthma are all a result of, in the vaccine world, the adjuvants, which I just explained, they tip the immune system up to allergic response. So we don't have any adjuvant, so it's not going to be that chronic disease. It's not going to show up in ours. The developmental delays are because that one picture where you saw, you know, the little character with all the diseases in the body, that if the immune system doesn't process that infectious disease out, it goes to its organ of affinity. And DPT, those are all neurotoxins, so it's going to show up in the brain. MMR goes to the meninges, that's of course going to show up in the brain. Pneumonia goes to the lungs, makes mucus. So all the, you know, any of these kind of conditions that are common in the vaccine paradigm, we're comparing with the Homeoprophylaxis. It's not showing up like that.
So you're comparing the response of...
We're looking at initial response as far as what does this remedy do in this child in the first 24, 48 hours. There's symptoms, and parents have written down all the symptoms. Then we're looking at, you know, what their health profile is based on these 5 criteria upon entrance to the program and on the exit of the program, and comparing along the way. And then we're looking at, you know, can parents do the program and finish the program, and then some of the other, what's the cost-benefit ratio, you know, is it affecting wellness in life, and, you know, how much money did they spend on medical bills compared to like the other child. Usually it's like the first child gets all the vaccines, the second child gets some of the vaccines, and the third child they find homeoprophylaxis and they're like, I want to not vaccinate this child. So then they can compare, you know, the health costs that these children have. So we're going to look at that. Yeah. Yes.
I have a couple of questions. Our oldest is fully vaccinated, and we have some concerns, I guess, that they've affected him behaviorally and developmentally. Would you detox?
You
from
detox
that
first, yep.
and then reintroduce?
And then do the prophylaxis, yep. So the expectation is that this child is born with a healthy immune system, and that you're educating healthy immune response. And like I said, if there's a previous vaccine, you'll introduce the nosode, and it wakes up not what we see as the normal disease expression. It'll wake up these other symptoms, which are based from the previous vaccines that they had. So depending on, we have an inclusion-exclusion sort of questionnaire that we ask, you know, are they heavy on any of these 5 things? Then we're going to say, you know, constitutional care first, vaccine, get their immune system working better, and then do the HP program after.
And then our youngest is not vaccinated,
Yes.
but I was more in tune with her, I guess, than my oldest, and she does have several allergies and like allergic responses.
Yeah, so it would still be probably good to do some constitutional care before. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So,
sorry, are there any, since there's no like adjuvants, are there any instances of like anaphylaxis or anything like that?
not that. No, because I'm the director and I've educated, and, you know, some people come back. There are some like prolonged immune responses, and those ones usually we've just been able to mitigate either by giving another dose of the remedy. So the remedy starts the immune process, but they don't go all the way, so you just give more and it actually helps them move through. Or if it's a post-vaccine situation, then we have to manage it that way. But they always come out on the other side. There's none that have not. And then as far as actual disease incidence, so this is one thing to think about within the vaccine model is whooping cough, mumps, measles, polio, and chickenpox are infectious contagious diseases. It doesn't matter to your kid whether my kid had the pneumococcal vaccine or not, right? Because that's a progressive disease. So pneumococcal, meningitis, tuberculosis, or tetanus, These are progressive diseases of the individual that has nothing to do with any public health care model, and they're not communicable. So like there's no like pneumonia going around the school, like you're not going to get it. So within the program itself, we've seen a few cases of whooping cough come through, and the kids actually, because they've had that immune response, then they know how to go through it, and they go through it quicker and faster than their peers.
Because my older child
Yeah.
got whooping cough, and Aaliyah, I was a little nervous, obviously, and it was my true test. We were away in Ventura, and she started coughing. It was unbelievable. It was like a 3-day whooping cough episode. Like she literally coughed. She got some of the symptoms that my older daughter had. She never lost. Like my daughter would literally go into moments of not breathing. The older one, the little one never did that. She had very, very mild case. Was over in a few days, and that was it. So
yeah.
That's what I tell them.
So because the immune system's been there, done that, it knows quickly how to just do that process. Yeah.
And then, Dr. Pam, my question is, my clients ask me all the time, I guess my question to you is, who here is planning on vaccinating? You're okay. So if you're not, just please see me, because I would love to operate your spouses or you guys. That would be a consultation, and then, so for a family that is not vaccinating, how would bioenergetics be helpful?
Well, bioenergetics is helpful for everybody, whether you're vaccinating or not, because we talked about that toxic soup. We're living in the toxic soup. So no one knows if there's a blockage in the flow. And so I've had parents who, especially when they were trying to get a vaccine exemption, they would say, well, how can this help me get an exemption? And I'm like, it's not about helping you to get an exemption. It's about you knowing if your child has a blockage in the flow system, because it's something that we probably all should know, because it's going to help our overall health. Like I said, it'll help the body to be able to heal inside out if you already know, and you can kind of correct that blockage before you end up in the disease state.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for coming. Yep. And, yeah.